Yeah, so before I get onto the main topic, which is thinking, I'd like to just give a very, very brief and inadequate summary of the practice, just in case there's anyone here who's not picked it up so far. So this is really a practice of mindfulness, a practice of awareness that is applicable throughout life. It's applicable through all activities of life. And really, the sitting practice we do here is just a kind of intensification, if you like, of the practice which you can do any time of day or night. So what marks this out as different to the usual mindfulness of breathing and metta bhavana is that here we're not directing our attention. We leave the attention to go where it wants to go, and we notice where it's going. Vajrapriya sometimes says this is what we're doing is we're accompanying attention with awareness. And so this can make it a very relaxed practice because we're not having to do the work of bringing our mind back, if you like. Wherever our mind goes, that's fine. We just notice that. So any object of awareness can be known by definition, basically. And all we're doing is knowing it. And we're using whatever the mind is alighting on, we're using that to build awareness. So it could be a sense experience, could be any of the physical senses, it could be the mind sense, and it could be any reaction. It could be any emotional, mental reaction. And the attitude that we do this is the right attitude, is an attitude of relaxed acceptance. As I say, it's a relaxed practice. We're not trying to make anything particular happen. So we're accepting the experience that arises as it arises. And if we find that our attitude isn't one of relaxed awareness, then we notice that. We notice what mental reaction is happening. So as I say, anything that arises can be known, and that is the practice. So any disappointment, any frustration, any grasping, that can be known as well. There's a lot more that could be said, but that'll do for the moment. So I'd like to talk in particular about thinking. And the first and only retreat I've been on with U Tejaniya, he started his first talk saying that in meditation, there are three types of object of awareness that can be thought to be problematic. Those are physical pain, intrusive sounds, and thoughts. So we can have these experiences of pain or intrusive sound or thoughts that can arise, and there's very frequently a mental reaction to those. We think that's a problem. But in common with all other objects of awareness, they are simply objects that can be known. And the practice is not to stop the thinking. The practice is to notice the thoughts as thought objects, mind objects. And also to notice any emotions that arise with them, frustration or excitement or grasping, whatever it is. There's nothing special about thoughts. They're not a special class of object, even though it feels like they're kind of particularly important or particularly problematic. So the thing about thoughts, the only special thing about thoughts is that it's particularly easy to get lost in them, isn't it? Which is a different way of saying it's particularly easy to identify with them. To identify with a thought, to think this is important, this is my thought. To believe the thought, to be attached to the thought, and to think of the thinker as me. So those are all really saying the same thing. So usually there's some kind of grasping associated with the thought or some kind of aversion to the thought when we sort of wake up out of it and think, oh, I've been thinking again. So the practice is simply to know all of that. It's not to stop the thoughts. In fact, I'll just read you. This is from U Tejani's little "What is the Right Attitude for Meditation" leaflet. And he says, "Don't feel disturbed by the thinking mind. You are not practicing to prevent thoughts, but rather to recognize and acknowledge thinking whenever it arises." It's that simple and that elusive, really. So we could even say that the more thoughts, the better, because that gives us the more opportunities to really tune in to the nature of them and the dynamic that goes on with them. If we can get interested, curious about how it all works, then we can, I find it can be quite a ride, quite an exciting white knuckle ride when there's lots of thoughts going on and there's enough awareness, sometimes at least, to recognize what's happening. And then we can really start to find some freedom around thinking, around thoughts. You've probably heard of the phrase, thoughts aren't facts. If we start to really internalize that knowing, thoughts aren't facts, then that gives us a lot of freedom. So this is another way of saying that what's another way of saying thoughts aren't facts? They are. This is another way of talking about right view. This is another aspect of the practice, is to recognize all objects of awareness as objects of awareness, not as some thing, some significant thing that needs to be grappled with and engaged with or got caught up with. It's just another object of awareness. It's just a thought. And particularly look out for what a Tibetan teacher called Rigzen Shigpo, what he calls the voice of lordly judgment. It's like we can get quite good sometimes at tracking all these little fleeting thoughts coming and going, and then suddenly one of them says something, some judgment. No, you're rubbish at this. No, this thought really needs to be felt now. This really needs to be thought through now. Suddenly there's this big thought that we identify with, which is the voice of lordly judgment. So you could notice that as well. The thought that's believed as really true. Okay, that's all I want to say about thoughts. I'll just mention that any time in the practice, if you start feeling lost or dull, well, first of all, you can notice that as an experience, but you can also simply ask yourself a question. You can ask a question like, what's happening? We can do this now. What's happening? And you're not looking to formulate an answer in words. You're just using that to wake up the mind, to sort of give it a little nudge. And also to say it's fine to stabilize the mind. If you do want to direct attention, it's fine to stabilize around the breathing or sounds or the body, just to kind of get awareness going again, if you like, and then you can open back up again. Okay, that's all I'll say for now. So if you want to get yourself ready,